Good morning, everyone. Welcome to EPA's webinar, which is intended to provide you with an overview of the agency's new approach methods, or NAMS, work plan. This work plan marks a significant step forward in achieving Administrator Wheeler's vision in reducing the agency's reliance on animal testing. And I am thrilled to be here with you all this morning. I'm Alexandra Dunn. I'm the Assistant Administrator for EPA's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention. And my office has been working very closely with the Office of Research and Development and other offices across EPA to truly make this an integrated, thoughtful plan for all of us. Last time I had the pleasure of speaking with you all was in December during the inaugural EPA NAMS conference. It certainly feels like such a long time since then, and I do hope that we'll be able to meet again soon. Last December, many of you on this webinar gathered with us at the agency and worked with us to bring Administrator Wheeler's vision on reducing animal testing to life. I've been saying for some time now that EPA is absolutely committed to continuing this important and critical work, and we are providing high-quality work. The work plan for developing, testing, and applying NAMS for chemical testing is an example of our commitment to doing the cutting-edge science, the innovative work, and the collaborative work that EPA is known for. Today's webinar is a chance for us to share with you the results of our efforts. As Administrator Wheeler mentioned at the first NAMS conference in December, reducing animal testing is a matter of great importance, and I know many of you share his interest, our collective interest in these new and frankly revolutionary methods. These methods can be used to significantly avoid or reduce the need for testing on animals, and at the same time provide us with reliable information that we need to understand chemical hazards and potential human exposures. I convey Administrator Wheeler's regrets for not being able to be with us here today, but I'm grateful that I'm joined by my colleagues, Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta, David Dunlap, and also Rusty Thomas. We have been keeping the administrator apprised continually of our work, and I know that he's looking forward to another successful conference on NAMS this fall. As you know, last September, when the administrator set the ambitious goals for the agency, it included reducing mammal study requests and funding by 30% by 2025 and completely eliminating these requests and funding by 2035. Any mammal studies requested or funded by EPA after 2035 will require administrator approval on a case-by-case basis. The September directive truly built on progress that EPA has been making for some time. Over the next 15 years, EPA will continue to improve on the science that we use and rely upon for agency decision-making, and we will work towards eliminating the use of mammals in testing where scientifically proven alternatives, reliable alternatives, are available. Today's webinar is designed to present to you the first iteration of our NAMS work plan. This work plan is an important milestone in that it describes EPA's roadmap and identifies tangible steps to pursuing and achieving the 2025 and 2035 reduction goals. The release of this NAMS work plan coincides with the 4th anniversary of TSCA, which we just observed last week. TSCA also made a commitment and showed congressional desire to reduce testing on animals. And over many years, EPA has built upon and made significant progress towards reducing, replacing, and refining animal testing requirements. EPA has already saved thousands of animals each year by using alternatives to acute toxicity testing while staying true to our mission of protecting human health and the environment. And we did it while maintaining confidence in our scientific conclusions. The discussions and ideas shared with you in December laid the foundation for the work plan that we're talking about today. Thank you, all of you, for your contributions, your enthusiasm, and your dedication. Thank you for your continued good work under what are clearly unusual and challenging circumstances, and for your time to participate today. This work plan would not have come to life without the expertise and leadership of all of you on this call and our colleagues across the agency, particularly our colleagues in EPA's Office of Research and Development. To that end, I am really pleased to have Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta, Dr. Jennifer Orme-Zavaleta, join us this morning. And I'd like to turn the virtual floor over to Jennifer. Thank you all for being with us. Jennifer?
All right, thank you, Alex. And Alex, it is really great to work with you on this effort. So I'm the Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator for ORD, and I also would like to welcome you to EPA's public webinar that features a summary of our new approach methods work plan. As you all know, that on June 23rd, EPA released the new approach methods work plan for reducing the use of animals in chemical testing. And today, we are excited to provide you an overview of this plan and to summarize what we see as the next steps. The released work plan lays out objectives and strategies to achieve the administrator's ambitious goals. And the objectives for the agency are to evaluate the regulatory flexibility for accommodating the use of NAMs, develop baselines and metrics for assessing progress, establish scientific confidence in NAMs and demonstrate the application to regulatory decisions, develop NAMs that help fill critical information gaps, and to engage and communicate with stakeholders to incorporate their knowledge and address concerns as EPA moves away from mammalian testing. So to develop the work plan, we convened experts from across the agency to help identify objectives and milestones to help ensure that the agency's regulatory compliance and enforcement activities. This includes chemicals and pesticide approvals. It also looks at agency's research, mainly to fully be protective of human health and the environment while pursuing the directive goals that we have. So we've been hosting this webinar today to help provide an overview of the work plan and to seek informal feedback and input from all of you. EPA is going to host a NAMS conference every year, and at which time the agency will report on the implementation of the work plan and progress that are made towards achieving the goals that Alex just mentioned for 2025 and 2035. The work plan represents a snapshot in time and will evolve as EPA's knowledge and experience grows, and as outside experts offer their perspectives and contributions. And so this is really a critical role that all of you play today, as well as during the workshop later in the fall. So I want to thank all of the experts across EPA for their hard work and their dedication towards developing this plan. And I would also like to thank all of you, all of our partners and stakeholders who are participating and will share your valuable insights and feedback during this conference that we'll hold later this year, last year, and what we'll hold later this year. So again, thank you for taking part in today's webinar, and we hope that you and all of your families stay safe and well. And with that, Rusty, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Alex, for introducing. Monica, can you see my slides?
Yes, I can see them.
All right. Well, let's get going. I think Alex and Jennifer introduced it well. Alex highlighted the fact that this work plan has been posted and released publicly last week, coinciding with the 4th anniversary of TSCA. So hopefully you've maybe had a chance to download the work plan and peruse it a little bit. What I'm going to attempt to do is just provide you with a very brief overview of the work plan. I encourage you to sort of dig more into it and also provide the agency. And one thing I want to highlight is that at the end, we're going to be asking you and putting up on the screen an email where you can send your informal feedback. So if you want to make some suggestions or highlight certain areas that maybe you see as areas for improvement, please send a quick email to that email address and provide any feedback that you have. The other thing I will ask, given that we're all in a virtual environment these days and trying to make our way through these webinars in the best way possible, as we go through this presentation, if you can type in, if you have any questions and need clarification, please type them into the chat box as we go along. At the end of the presentation, sometimes it takes a little while to accumulate all the questions and attempt to answer them. So if you have any thoughts or feedback or questions along the way, please type them into the chat box in real time, and then we'll try to answer them at the end. With that, I'm going to start and give you a little bit of an introduction to this new approach methods work plan that was developed. I think Alex and Jennifer did a great job of sort of giving you the high points of the memo that was released last year. I'm going to reiterate them very briefly, but Alex laid them out very nicely, in that the administrator asked us and set very ambitious goals, and I would remind you that these are just goals that he asked us to shoot for, right? That we're trying to reduce our requests for and funding of mammalian animal studies by 30% by 2025. And eliminate all mammalian study requests and funding by 2035. And as well, come as close as possible to excluding reliance on mammalian studying from its approval process. And we tend to accomplish these goals through the development and application of what are called new approach methods. Most of you who are in the scientific arena have probably heard of the term new approach methods. It was originally coined in about 2014, predominantly in Europe, but since that time, the meaning of the new approach methods has evolved over time. And what I mean, at least in this presentation and in the work plan itself, new approach methods is defined as any technology, methodology, or approach, or combination thereof that can provide information on chemical hazard and risk assessment to avoid the use of animal testing. So that's my definition right now, and the definition that's used in the work plan. So keep that in mind. So it encompasses a whole range of technologies and approaches that can be used to replace animal testing in a chemical hazard and risk assessment context. Okay. So as also as part of that memo, ORD and OCSPP were tasked with forming a group of agency experts to develop a work plan. We were asked to do that in a fairly aggressive time frame. I'm going to show you how the results of that effort and give you some high points of the work plan and how we intend to achieve the goals that were laid out by the administrator. So, as Jennifer highlighted, in the development of the work plan, we formed a cross-agency work group of about 34 experts, and these representatives were pulled from various offices throughout the agencies. You see the offices listed there, includes our offices of Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, from the Office of Research and Development, where I'm from, Office of Air, Office of Water, OLEM, and the Office of the General Counsel. So we had legal experts in different regulatory arenas where they can apply these approaches, and where traditional animal studies are also applied in various decision contexts that the agency needs to make. These 34 experts, were distributed into 5 different subgroups. One was tasked with tackling the issue of regulatory flexibility in existing statutes. I'll highlight a little bit of what that group was tasked to do in a minute. Another group was tasked with baselines and metrics, kind of holding the agency accountable. I'll go over that as well. Another group was tasked with scientific confidence and demonstration. Another one was NAM development and scientific gaps. And the last was communication and outreach. So these 34 experts were distributed in these different areas. We also held an internal EPA workshop after these subgroups were formed in January 2020. And this was shortly after the December 2019 EPA NAM conference. The reason we did that is we wanted to review the presentations that were made at that conference, also the breakout group discussions, understand what was the feedback that surfaced from those breakout groups, because the charge questions that were highlighted in those breakout groups were really meant to sort of stimulate discussion among these different subgroups. And then we sat down and outlined and discussed what the structure of the work plan would be, the various components that were necessary to achieve those goals, right? And then began to write, right? We then, as I highlighted earlier, released the final EPA NAMS work plan on June 22nd, 2020. And you can download it at that website that you have here. The people that really did all the heavy lifting and work are listed here. We have an EPA NAMS work plan leadership team. Sarah Stillman, who's my colleague in OCSPP. We are really tasked with kind of pulling and pushing this work plan along under the direction of Alex and Jennifer and David Dunlap. I might compliment Alex and David and Jennifer for their really championing the development of this work plan and really pushing it along and pushing the group of us along in order to develop it. So I appreciate their leadership in doing that. Also colleagues in ORD, Maureen Gwynn, Jeff Friston, and Monica Lindenbrink, as well as my colleagues in OCSPP, Anna Lowett, Isabel Craig, Gino Serrano, Monique Perrone. We're all tasked with leading development of this work plan. And then, as I mentioned before, these 34 individuals across the different agency, and you can see the list there that were allocated into the different subgroups. And they were all had a leader in these different subgroups and were tasked with writing and developing the outline of this work plan. So bottom line is what I want to communicate to you is this really was a team effort that was a mix of both scientific experts and people that do research for a living, as well as the regulatory experts and those individuals that really do, that really regulate and understand the application and translation of these new approach methods and where we need to go with them. The content of the work plan. So in order to achieve the goals, we laid out 5 objectives. And these 5 objectives were matched with the different reduction goals while ensuring that the agency decisions remain fully protective of human health and the environment. I think that point was reinforced by both Alex and Jennifer as they laid out the introduction. We then, within each of those objectives, laid out short and long-term strategies that the agency is going to use to accomplish those objectives. And then, again, within those strategies, we laid out different specific deliverables as well as timelines linked with each objective. So those are fairly aggressive, but in order to meet those animal reduction goals, we felt that these were the specific deliverables and timelines that were necessary in order to accomplish those goals. The other thing that was highlighted by both Jennifer and Alex, and I want to reinforce that here, is that the EPA's NAM work plan represents a snapshot in time. And we intend fully to evolve the work plan. It's a living document. And we intend to involve it with the knowledge and experience that we gain throughout some of these different deliverables and these different strategies. And just highlighting one of them in here, I'm sort of previewing it, is there's one of the deliverables is a series of case studies that the agency is going to undertake in order to demonstrate application of these NAMs. Well, as we learn throughout those different case studies, we may refine and evolve our work plan in order to reflect the knowledge that we gain from those different case studies. That's just one example of many of how we're intending to continue to keep this work plan evergreen. All right, so digging into the work plan itself, these are the 5 objectives that were laid out for achieving the administrator's goals. The first one was highlighted in the introduction, which is to evaluate regulatory flexibility for accommodating NAMs. Right? The second one was to develop baselines and metrics for assessing progress, holding us accountable. The third was establish scientific confidence in demonstrating application of NAMs. The fourth is developing NAMs that fill critical information gaps. And the last is to engage and communicate with stakeholders such as yourself to make sure that we let you know of how we're progressing and how the science is evolving. So let's dig into each of these objectives and lay out what the strategy was that underlined the objectives and a few of the deliverables that are associated with those. So the evaluate regulatory flexibility for accommodating NAMs, we did, as is noted in the work plan, if you downloaded and read it, we did do an initial survey of the different statutes and regulations that the agency has in place that governs its mission. Right, and the initial review led us to believe that there really, in most of these regulations and policies, that there really wasn't any significant barriers to applying NAMs instead of animal testing. But in order to ensure ourselves that that is actually true, we intend to perform a thorough review of the existing statutes, programmatic regulations, policies, and guidance to identify if there are any mammalian testing requirements embedded in those that may not allow us to have flexibility for applying new approach methods. So this is a deeper dive other than the initial survey that was done for this initial work plan. And then along with that, as we develop and identify what may be these barriers, we're going to consider options for introducing flexibility on implementing or using appropriate new approach methods for those regulatory purposes and for a range of different decision contexts, right? And we intend to deliver on this an EPA report on the findings of this review as well as those options. And we intend to do this in 2021, so next year. So it's an aggressive timeline that we intend to accomplish over the next year. The next objective is to develop baselines and metrics for assessing of progress. And I mentioned this twice before, but this is really so that you can hold the EPA and the agency accountable for making progress towards our goals, right? And our strategy is really to build on previously established baselines and metrics for animal use within the OCSPP and ORD, the Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention and the Office of Research and Development. These are the two offices. Our offices are the ones that both request animal use the most as well as use the most animals in a research context, right? And so we've, over time, as a matter of necessity, have developed ways to track our animal use as well as the requests of our animals, requests for animal tests, right? So given that we've established some of the infrastructure that are necessary for evaluating our baselines and tracking that and developing these metrics, the strategy is to extend that knowledge and that infrastructure to other EPA offices. Since these baselines and metrics, it was recognized, need to be customized to the specific requirements in each program. So and I think the Office of Air and the Office of Water and other offices quite have the same requirements as the Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention or the Office of Research and Development. So it's recognized that each of our baselines and metrics and our ability to track them may be customized and need to be tailored to the needs of each of these offices. Our deliverable in order to do that is to provide progress and summary metrics annually through the EPA website beginning in Q4 of 2021, and this is going to be associated with the 2021 NAMS conference. So we intend to release this annually corresponding to when our annual New Approach Methods conference occurs. So that every year you can ask us, hey, Rusty, how are we doing in meeting these goals, right? What are the baselines and the metrics and progress that we're making? All right, the third objective is to establish confidence in new approach methods and demonstrates application to regulatory decisions. So our strategy is multi-component in this particular area. So our first part of that strategy is to characterize the scientific quality and relevance of the existing animal tests, and that's our first component of our strategy. And part of this is that necessary. Hold on, I'm getting a beep, so I'm making sure that I'm still on the line. All right, I think I still am. Monica, can you still hear me?
Yes,
right,
you're good.
I got a beep, so I wasn't sure if that cut me off. Apologies to everybody. So our strategy, as I mentioned, was multi-component, and the first one was to characterize the scientific quality and relevance of existing animal tests. And part of this was that both in the memo and under TSCA, there is a mandate that these new approach methods need to be as good as or better than the existing animal tests. But what does that mean? How do we compare them and establish that similar scientific quality and relevance as the existing tests? And part of that requires us to evaluate how good and reliable and relevant are the existing animal tests. And so that's one component. The other component is to develop a scientific confidence framework to evaluate the quality, reliability, and relevance of NAMs. So after we've evaluated how good we need to be, right, we also intend to develop a framework that we can then evaluate the quality and reliability and relevance of NAMs against that baseline, against that comparator, right? The fourth component is to develop recommended reporting templates. One of the things that's I think a lot of people have come to realize is that these new approach methods are significantly different than our traditional animal studies, both in how we perform them and how we need to report them, both in terms of how do you know that they are giving you the results that we expect, right? How do we report them, and how do regulators then take that information and evaluate the information that's being generated from these new approach methods? And we want to have standardized reporting templates for those. This builds on earlier work that's occurring internationally through the OECD, but we need to customize it for specific applications within the agency as well. And the last component of this objective is to demonstrate application to regulatory decisions through a series of case studies. Right? We want to, learning by doing, I think, is the apt approach through these different case studies. Deliverables associated with these four components of this strategy are we intend to elicit an NAS report on the uncertainties and utility of existing mammalian toxicity tests. We intend to provide that somewhere in the neighborhood of Q4 of 2022. We intend to deliver a scientific confidence framework to evaluate the quality, reliability, and relevance of NAMs in Q3 of that same year. And we also want to generate one case study every other year beginning in 2022. And these case studies are really a partnership between the Office of Research and Development and our regulatory colleagues working together to design these case studies. Here are the new approach methods that we have to answer a specific question at this point in time. Here are the regulatory questions that are most in need of an answer, and then developing that partnership and evaluating whether these new approach methods actually can be used in that regulatory decision. And so we look forward to working together with our regulatory colleagues to perform those different case studies. The next objective is to develop new approach methods that fill scientific challenges and fill important information gaps. And this objective is really both to lay out a strategy that both covers internal development as well as external development. The internal development is that EPA over the last couple years have developed a new research planning process where we work very closely with our regulatory partners to identify what are the research needs. And then we develop a research program that is matched and tailored according to those regulatory needs. And so that joint planning exercise that we undergo is going to incorporate a significant portion of new approach methods that can be developed to address those regulatory needs. So we're going to continue this joint planning exercise with a particular focus on NAM development in order to meet those specific goals and to fill critical information gaps as we progress. The second part of that strategy is do what the agency can to encourage development and evaluation of NAMs by our external partners and parties, right? And together this internal, inside, as well as external strategy is intended to fill these information gaps and address the different scientific challenges that we currently face in new approach methods. Right now, at this point in time, we don't have all the new approach methods that are necessary in order to achieve those ambitious goals. The deliverables associated with these objective is to develop an EPA strategic research action plans on a regular 4-year planning cycle, or to continue our interactions with our regulatory partners and continue to develop these new approach methods within that regular research planning cycle. And also to encourage the development of new approach methods through a variety of different mechanisms. One of these mechanisms has been the STAR grant program, where the agency has released different solicitations that are focused on new approach methods across a different set of information needs or needs for development where we need to further mature the science in specific areas. I think the last one was really focused on maturing the science in toxicokinetics. How do we better use new approach methods and mature those new approach methods so that we can get a better, more accurate, more robust toxicokinetic models to predict the disposition and accumulation of chemicals in the body. Right. We also tend to facilitate partnerships with other organizations that are focused on establishing scientific confidence in alternative methods. And this deliverable isn't just one part in time, it's an ongoing deliverable, and it's something that we intend to continue throughout the work plan. The last objective is really to engage and communicate with stakeholders such as yourself. Right? This is an important component as we go on this journey together. To make sure that you guys are comfortable, that everybody is comfortable with the EPA, and that we are putting science before sort of implementing some of these goals and objectives, that we really are protecting human health and the environment while we're implementing these new approach methods. Right? The strategy is to first develop a centralized portal for releasing EPA-related NAM information. I think that website that I put up at the beginning of the presentation is that central portal. Right? We intend to also actively solicit comments and feedback associated with these deliverables. I hinted that at the beginning as well. We have an email that you can send us comments and feedback, suggestions, so how we can improve. We also intend to develop various training courses, workshops, and conferences for stakeholders on these new approach methods. Right? The deliverables associated with this strategy is to deliver this NAM website, which we've already done, give public webinars such as this one, highlighting the work plan. We also intend to continue these public webinars when we release a new deliverable. So some of these deliverables that we've outlined in the work plan, a webinar will be scheduled, and we can talk through what was achieved through that deliverables, what the agency has learned through that deliverables, and how it fits into the larger puzzle of achieving those goals. Right? And this is also an ongoing deliverables because what we're doing throughout the work plan is staged across time. For training and opportunities for scientific exchange and progress updates, we intend to do also throughout the course of this work plan. One example is the annual EPA NAMS conferences that we intend to hold. But we also intend to do a number of training opportunities to highlight different learnings that occurred throughout the NAM work plan. For example, one of these case studies may identify specific NAMs that may be predictive or be used in a particular decision associated with a particular hazard. So once we've identified through that case study what that NAM is, how we can interpret that, the new approach method, what are its limitations, then we can provide training as well as opportunities for scientific exchange around what the agency learned through that particular case study. And as I mentioned before, this is going to be an ongoing deliverable as well. My last couple slides highlights a couple points that I made through, and as well as Alex and Jennifer made throughout the presentation. Please save the date. A week of October 22nd is when we intend to hold the second annual NAM conference. Right now it's still uncertain whether that's going to be an in-person event or a virtual event. Kind of keeping our options open on that, but we're actively exploring and developing the agenda for that, as well as laying some of the groundwork for that second annual NAM conference. So please keep that date and that week open on your calendars. It's going to be another exciting event. Also highlighted at the beginning, please provide your feedback. If you have any suggestions or things that you feel that need to be explored further, please email nam@epa.gov, and the feedback will be compiled and shared with the leadership team. And then lastly, I think, Monica, we can open the floor for questions for people that people may have around the work plan.
Okay. Yeah, we do have some questions here in the question and answer pod. Are you able to see those, Rusty, or would you like me to read them to you?
I can see them now. I have to get out of my full screen mode.
Okay.
All right. Sarah Hughes asks, is there going to be any efforts by EPA to reduce all vertebrate testing, or is the focus only on mammals, fish, and vertebrates, and should be included in this plan? Sarah, the memo that was laid out by the administrator specified mammals, and so at the current time, the NAM work plan is focused on mammalian studies, but I think that I understand your suggestion, and I think that many of the things that we're learning through this work plan should also be able to be applied to vertebrate testing as well. So I think the vertebrate testing component will also be improved and developed along with the mammalian testing. Adriana asked, this is a commendable effort towards reducing the use of mammals in toxicity testing. However, it's unfortunate that other vertebrates, specifically fish, have not been mentioned. Can you please comment on in future on the inclusion of fish? And I think I already answered that. I think that the memo was focused predominantly on the mammalian testing, but I do believe that many of the new approach methods can be applied also in the reduction of vertebrate testing as a whole. Joseph asked, the ETEPI is described as allowing EPA to determine the extent of animal testing that the agency has explicitly required under TSCA. New chemicals are rarely subject to upfront testing requirements. More frequently, they are subject to conditional, triggered, and pending testing requests. Will ETEPI include these conditional requests? That's a good question, and I don't think that my colleague is on the phone to answer that. So I'm going to have to, Joseph, I'm going to have to get back to you on the conditional, triggered, and pending testing requests. My understanding is yes, that it does include these conditional requests, but I'm not 100% confident on that. And so my colleague Gino is going to have to answer that, and I think he's out on annual leave at this particular time. So I apologize for that. But we can get back to you on that question. Is there somebody that can answer that on the phone? Okay. The next question.
We're keeping track of the question, so we'll be sure to respond back with a response to that.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. Will you be consulting agency lawyers, not scientists, administrators, or political appointees, to determine which statutes allow or do not allow the use of new approach methods? As I highlighted at the beginning, the people that were part of the different subgroups, the Office of General Counsel did include some representatives to the development of this work plan. Those OGC representatives were lawyers, and so they were a part of that initial review, and we do intend to include them going forward so that that it's not just a science technical work plan, but also covers what may be more legal questions surrounding those statutes. So yes, that is intended to be true. It has been in the past, and we continue to plan to include them in that conversation going forward. Gloria asks, while existing laws and regulations may not specifically state that animal data are required, current approaches for developing reference doses and cancer slope factors used as health basis for standards requires that they are based on mammalian, lab animal, or human data. Is it envisioned that the entire approach for human health risk assessment be revised so that reference dose or cancer slope factors can be developed from non-mammalian data? I think that's part of what we're going to learn throughout the work plan and these different case studies. How can we evolve the science of risk assessment and characterize the various hazards using these new approach methods so that we can both identify safe doses, these reference doses, as well as our various risks associated for cancer, associated with chemical exposure from these new approach methods. I think there's still a lot that needs to be done and a lot we need to learn in order to be able to achieve that ambitious goal, but I think that's the intent, right? Will risk assessment look exactly in the future like it does today? Probably not. But how it's going to look is I think yet to be determined. All right, another person asked, how do you plan to develop the NAMS framework with an earlier delivery date than the report on the utility of animal tests? He said after, but the dates seem reversed. The NAMS framework for confidence framework. Oh, I think that's generally true. The confidence framework, if I remember right, I'll have to go back and look, but yes, I think it's in Q3 and Q4. That's a good point, and maybe we need to, and we should be able to have some understanding of what the NAS has to say about the standards associated with the new approach or the current animal tests, right? What the expectations are surrounding the current animal tests. But that developing that scientific confidence framework of how we develop it isn't necessarily dependent on what the NAS says about how variable and uncertain the current animal tests are. But your point is well taken in terms of the timing of that, and it's something that we can think more about in terms of informing our development of the framework with that NAS study. Doug Wolf asks, I have no doubt that this effort will be successful within the U.S. EPA and the application of the evaluations that the U.S. EPA has to perform for the U.S. since toxic chemicals and pesticides have to be independently evaluated and registered in all other countries where they will be used or imported. What will be done to accomplish global acceptance, since currently the EU is heading in the opposite direction under some of their legislations, and countries with developing regulatory systems will not be able to move as fast as the U.S. EPA. Doug, I hear your question, and I think the memo was really, let me answer this in a couple different ways. I think the memo was really a charge to the EPA, and we're trying to lead by example, right? That this work plan and the memo is sort of setting our goals within the U.S., and we will do everything in our power to achieve those goals, right? We don't have necessarily influence over the way Europeans do, but I think that as we develop these new these case studies and as we develop these new approach methods and demonstrate their application, I think that we can, through continual scientific exchange, many of us are on different committees and attend different meetings and are very collaborative with our European colleagues, and I think over time that the rising tide will lift all boats, and so I think that over time that influence and the success of this program will eventually spill over into Europe, and they will follow our lead. At least that's my hope. Nick Christie says, how do outside organizations interested in establishing scientific in NAMs in collaboration with EPA inquire about establishing such a partnership with EPA? I think it's, we have different mechanisms to establishing those partnerships. There's these collaboration agreements, there's different materials transfer agreements, so there's a number of mechanisms that we can discuss in terms of collaborating with the agency on specific research and scientific questions. I think there's other mechanisms and consultations that can be done also on the regulatory side as well. And so those are, depending on whether you're asking more of a scientific technical collaboration or whether you're interested in more of a regulatory application question, we'll decide which mechanism of which you will explore in terms of the engagement that you want with the agency. Rick Becker, you mentioned NAMs include TK methods. Please also describe activities focused on developing exposure NAMs. It's true. New approach methods, the global use of the term, or at least the term, the way the agency uses, includes new approach methods for hazard, it does for toxicokinetics, and it can for exposure as well, since it's really using and contributing to these new approach methods that can contribute to both hazard as well as risk assessment. And risk also includes exposure, right? There isn't a whole lot in the current work plan in terms of exposure-related NAMs, but we have a whole series of different both regulatory as well as research activities that are focused on developing and refining our exposure-related NAMs. But that's not necessarily the focus of this particular work plan, since it was really intended to reduce the use of animals. So it wasn't a big focus. But I imagine in certain of these case studies that are going to be developed and released in every other year, there will be an exposure NAM component developed and embedded within those activities. Mark Striner says, this is Mark, I have a quick question. If a mammalian testing experiment is identified that cannot be replicated or replaced by a NAM as the EPA divests from whole animal testing, is there a federal agency that will be able to perform whole animal testing in select instances if needed, or perhaps academic studies? Well, I think it depends on, well, let me put it this way: the agency's goals, those are animal reduction goals, but our primary goal and our primary mission is to protect human health and the environment. So if there is a critical endpoint that cannot be replicated or replaced by a NAM at a certain point in time, I don't think it's going to be replaced. Right? I think that we're going to continue to work and do research and develop the methods in order to eventually replace that. But I don't think we're going to sacrifice the
hey, Rusty,
the science or the
can you hear me, Rusty?
Protection of human health and the environment if there's
Hey,
something
I wanted to totally agree with that. I'm sorry
provided
interrupting,
by
but I think it's
an
important for everyone to recognize that the administrator's memo does not
first and foremost
categorically exclude all animal
yes,
tests.
I can hear you, David.
It sets a goal and it makes it clear that that if there's, as you clearly pointed out, if there's a need for an animal test, we will continue to do that and to ensure that human health and safety. So the memo does not put us on a path where we will, eventually, if we still need animal testing, we will still be able to use it. But certainly the goal is to find quicker, faster, cheaper, and just as effective testing that doesn't use animals, hopefully in the future.
Yeah, and I will point out that in the memo specifically states that in instances such as that, the administrator can provide specific approval for that particular test, animal test. So it doesn't necessarily or doesn't say that all animal tests will be replaced by a certain date, but there are instances that if it can't, there are ways to have the administrator approve those specific uses of animals. So thank you for jumping in, David. The next question by Joseph is that EPA has recently begun making PMNs publicly available. Many PMNs, pre-manufacturing notices, include the results of vertebrate animal testing. TSCA requires anyone developing information for submission to first attempt to use alternative methods or strategies. Will EPA review compliance with this provision? Well, I'm not a regulator. I'm not an OPP, but OPPT, the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics. So I can't necessarily speak to that directly. So, and my colleague Gino is, again, not on the line, but I think we can get back to you with an answer to your question, Joseph. So my apologies for not being able to answer that. But I can imagine that TSCA, that we intend to fulfill the requirements of TSCA, and I'm sure our colleagues in OPPT will do what is first and foremost outlined in the statute. Joseph also asked, will there be opportunity for formal comment on the NAM work plan? No, there is not formal comment, but you are able to provide informal feedback through the email address that was provided. So, Carrie Postal White asked, what do you think is the importance and benefit of ambitious replacement targets and deadlines rather than just saying NAM should be prioritized? I think it's a reasonable question, but I think that setting goals, I think as we all know both in our personal and professional lives, that having a goal really stimulates the activity and focuses the mind towards achieving those goals, right? Just saying that NAM should be prioritized doesn't necessarily focus you in the same way. And so I think that setting those goals, whether or not we can achieve them scientifically, I certainly hope we can, and I believe we can, but setting those goals really allows the agency to focus and turn towards developing solutions that meet those goals. So I think it's just like any goal that you have, right? Just saying I'm going to prioritize exercise today is not the same as saying that I'm going to exercise 30 minutes every day. And I think setting specific goals for yourself really holds you accountable towards doing that. And that's the other part, is that is an element of accountability associated with setting targets and deadlines rather than just saying, hey, I just prioritized it. So I think there's two parts. It's that accountability and the focus that you put on the effort. Christy says, regarding scientific development action plans, how will EPA consider or incorporate NAMs that are developed externally, such as by regulated companies or other non-EPA developers? I'm assuming you mean the research development action plan, the research action plans. So assuming that's what you mean, Christy, we, I think, already are. There are in a number of cases, I know my center incorporates technologies outside of EPA. Not all of the new approach methods that we apply for in a research and development context are developed inside the agency. As you know, with ToxCast and a number of the other efforts, we've explored what industry has to offer and try to apply it for specific agency needs. And so I don't think that that will not continue under this new effort. So I think that we intend to continue to do that going forward for specific assays as well as these more complex organotypic organs on a chip. So we're also exploring external partnerships and technologies such as that as well. So I think that will continue. Carrie,
I have time for 2 more questions.
Oh, okay, man. I thought I was getting close to the end, but maybe not. Will EPA coordinate this program with the National Toxicology Program? Agnes asked that question. And I do think that, yes, we continue to have great collaboration with both the NTP and NICETA. I think that will continue. And I imagine that our collaboration will be both associated with this work plan, but again, this work plan was really EPA-centric, given the EPA memo was focusing on the agency. Paul Carmichael, I think we'll have one last question from Paul Carmichael. How soon might we see some...
Sorry to interrupt. It looks like you only have one more after Paul, so if you feel like there's enough time, you can answer Maria's question as the last one.
I can. I don't want to leave out Maria. Paul, how soon might we see some output from case studies mentioned, giving reasons to believe and demonstrating the way we should all approach our testing for the future? Well, I think we intend to, as we laid out in the work plan, have one case study every other year beginning in 2021. However, I do believe that some of our case studies, we have a whole list of active case studies that we're engaging with our partners currently. So I imagine that these case studies will be released over the next year or two, the first ones of those case studies, and then we'll continue to release them on the schedule that was outlined in the work plan. But I don't believe that you'll have to wait several years for the outcome of many of these case studies, Paul. I think that's going to be more near term, and as we learn and apply these technologies to different regulatory decisions. Maria asked, are case studies going to be led by EPA or done in collaboration with different partners? Right now, at least, the case studies within the work plan are led and performed within the agency. That doesn't mean that there aren't any other case studies that aren't going on outside of the agency. We have a number of case studies that are being performed both in OECD. We have these IATA case studies that are going on within OECD. We also have case studies that are going on through our intergovernmental collaborations and workshops, the Accelerating Progress in Chemical Risk Assessment. So we have a number of case studies outside the agency, but the work plan is really agency-centric. So the case studies that are being performed as part of the work plan are really agency
Excellent.
associated.
Thank you, Rusty.
But, as I
Can
said
you hear
before,
me still?
other case studies outside the agency will be
Monica,
performed as well.
excellent, Monica. Thank you.
So with
Rusty,
that, I think that's the end of my questions. And
great.
I'm going to turn it over to
Rusty,
David
thanks
Dunlap
for that great overview and
closing
for
comments.
talking
So
for
David, the
almost an
floor
hour
is yours.
straight. So I appreciate that very much. I know how that can be sometimes. And thanks. I think we had 300 plus or 300 or so registered attendees. Thank you very much for everybody's time. Thank you for your attention and your interest and excellent questions. Rusty, it's exciting. I know I've been part of it all along, but it's exciting to see how far we've come, the progress we made, and I hope everybody on the webinar feels the same way. As Rusty said, my name's David Dunlap. I'm the Deputy Assistant Administrator here in the Office of Research Development, and I'm here to just give a couple closing remarks. I won't belabor it because I know everybody has the rest of the day to get some work done as well. I'm thrilled when we get these things done early in the morning. This was truly a group effort, and it started with the administrator's vision, but it's so much more than just that vision. And I think, some of the questions that were asked started to allude to, what are the goals, what are the vision? But the efforts of many were behind what you see today. And I would like to thank, and Rusty and others mentioned these names, but I'd like to thank personally those work groups and those sub-work groups who worked hard to make the plan a reality in record time. You've heard a bunch of names today, but I'd like to also give a special thank you to Monica Linenbrink for facilitating this webinar. She's sort of that voice you hear that tells us everything's okay. The agency has worked very hard to continue its mission during quarantine. In my opinion, the agency staff have been as effective as ever, but this does not happen without people like Monica behind the scenes. We've worked very hard. I think especially ORD, we've always worked very hard at trying to work in a virtual environment because we are so geographically dispersed across 12 offices. But I think it's really shown here during the quarantine. And Monica, thank you for your efforts to make this webinar not just a reality, but one that functioned very well. It goes without saying, but I'd like to say one more time thank you to Rusty and Sarah Stillman, the EPA workgroup leads. Without their guidance and hard work, this work plan would not have been possible. So congratulations, virtual pat on the back. Thank you very much. As you know, hopefully you know, reducing animal testing is of personal importance to Administrator Wheeler, and he's made it clear that he's very thrilled with our fast start. But we still have much to do if we were to meet our 2025 and 2035 goals. This is an aggressive schedule. I think we all recognize that, and it will require us to continue what I consider a very collaborative stakeholder engagement to this point. It's what's got us here, and that's what I hope we continue. I hope that collaboration is very evident, and it's certainly something we want to continue to emphasize. So with that in mind, and certainly repeating what Rusty and others have said, I encourage you to stay updated on EPA's progress implementing the work plan by regularly checking our website. I think it's up there on the screen, epa.gov/NAM. All our updates will be posted to this website. With respect to the collaborative nature, we want your feedback. Though we don't have an official FRN notice and comment, we certainly want your feedback on this, and some of that's been provided today, and we certainly look forward to more of it. And you can send that to our email address, nam@epa.gov. That feedback will help us move forward with implementing the work plan, but also keep that document evergreen. I think I emphasize it regularly. The work plan is just the first step. It gives us direction. It helps us head towards our very aggressive goals, but we all recognize that the work plan itself and the direction it gives right now may change as we learn more. So we need your input. And then finally, be sure to join us for our second annual EPA NAM conference in October. We are busy planning the event. We'll keep you advised, but of course you can also check the website that I just mentioned. And that's it. So once again, thank you to all of you for joining us today. Remember, wash your hands, wear a mask, and be nice to others, and have a great 4th of July. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Stay safe.